Hi, folks. This is Daniela Cambone, and welcome back to StansberryInvestor.com. Before we start today's segment, though, I want to just share with you a report that Stansberry Research has put out that I highly recommend you check out. With most investors going about life investing and retirement planning as if nothing unusual has happened to our financial system, not realizing the repercussions of the 11 trillion that's been pumped into the US financial system in the past 18 months alone, it's particularly a good read at this moment in time. At least 4 billionaires have stated publicly that Americans aren't paying enough attention to this development. And now a former Goldman Sachs banker says sooner than most people think, millions of Americans will potentially be pushed down out of the middle class, out of private retirement, and out of a decent life based on independence and privacy into a collectivist nightmare he calls financial lockdown. So find out how to protect yourself, your money, and your family with a free copy of his new report. In it, he'll show you the 4 steps he recommends you take immediately. You simply have to go to www.wakeupcall2021.com to get a free copy of this report. Again, it's www.wakeupcall2021.com. Get your free report today. It's a great read. All right, that said, today we're talking about soaring energy prices, which is causing alarm amongst European leaders that there will be a winter fuel crisis that could play into the hands of gas-rich Russia. In Europe, natural gas prices have skyrocketed almost 600% this year on worries that current low storage levels will be insufficient for the winter. While in the US, natural gas futures recently hit 12-year highs. So what is going on? Joining us today on Stansberry Investor to help make sense of the current situation is Josh Crumb, formerly of Goldman Sachs, now the CEO of Abaxx, as well as Dave Greely, also formerly of Goldman Sachs, Bridgewater, and now works closely with Josh. Nice to have you both on the show. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Daniela.
Thank you very much, Daniela.
Well, I'm happy that you can add some context to what is happening in Europe. Dave, let's start with you since you're a senior economic advisor, and this is really your area of specialization. What is up with the soaring energy prices, 600% in Europe?
Right, it is quite mind-boggling, but I think what we're seeing really comes down to we have 2 interrelated energy crises occurring both in Europe and in China at the same time. And like everything in commodities, it's down to supply and demand at the base. So you've got a rebound in demand with the COVID reopenings and all the stimulus that governments have been occurring, but that demand's coming back at the same time that supply has been much tighter than expected. So when we look at the case in Europe, as you said, prices at astronomical levels. So prices $35 to $40 in MMBTU compared to the United States, where ours are up to 6, but you're looking at over 6 times the price for gas in Europe that we're experiencing here in the US. And why is that? Well, supply has been tighter than it was expected. Inventories after last winter were low. You had a cold winter last year. Inventory going into this winter has been low, about 75% in storage right now. Typically that's closer to 90%. So the market becomes concerned of, will there be enough gas to get through the winter? And if not, where would prices have to go to keep the lights on and keep the heat going? At the same time, you've had a big decline in Russian imports into Europe. Now, there was a fire at a processing facility. There's also political wrangling around the Nord Stream 2 pipeline coming on. So there's concern, will there be enough gas coming in from Russia to help us get through the winter? And so what happens? Prices have to spike up because if you don't have reliable supply, all you can do is take demand out of the system. And the demand for gas does not go away easily, especially if it's going to be for gas for people heating people's homes during the winter.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the Russia component. I said how it may play into the hands of Russia. Talk to us a little bit about whether, European leaders are really fearful of that situation.
I think they need to be. I think any time that you're reliant for something so critically important on a single supplier, regardless of who it is, you want to be concerned about that. One of the things that we're seeing in markets now is, we're trying to convert our energy system from a fossil fuel-based system that was made to be reliable into a low carbon system that is still as yet unproven. And so as we make that transition, that requires a lot of infrastructure to be built so that new system will be both responsible and reliable. And when it's not, if you don't have inventory, if you don't have spare capacity, if you're reliant on single fuels, like Europe is becoming increasingly reliant on natural gas as it tries to move away from coal, which is great from a climate perspective, but from a reliability perspective, where's the gas going to come from? If you're going to be reliant on it coming from a single supplier like Russia that has motivations of its own, in addition to supplying gas into Europe, other political considerations, that needs to be a concern.
Well, speaking about, coal and supply constraints, it's not just Europe. If we look at the situation in China, we have tight coal supplies and toughening emission standards have driven power shortages across China. Talk to us a little bit about the situation over there.
Right. So China, you've had the resumption of demand like you've had in Europe, but you've also had very tight coal supplies. Part of this was, China also trying to move away from coal into other sources of fuel for generating power and electricity. Part of it trying to have stepped up safety inspections in mines after a number of accidents, and that curtailed some coal production. And also politics. So, Australia, major supplier of coal, major, source of coal coming into China. China banned those imports earlier in the year as part of a dispute over Australia's stance towards Huawei and 5G, and some of the comments of Australia wanting to have more investigations into the source of the COVID outbreak. So, China limiting its imports of Australian coal left tight coal supplies, and then makes China more reliant on LNG, which brings us, I think, to that really third step of why are these two things so interrelated? Well, it's not just that it's a rebound off of COVID, it's that our system, our energy system, is both more vulnerable right now, but also more global. It's more interconnected. And with LNG, liquefied natural gas, making what were regional gas markets connected by the ability to ship gas from one area to another, what you're seeing is that tightness in China and a need for LNG to help, produce power. At the same time, Europe needs more gas because it's not getting as much from Russia as it needs. Now you're bidding up the price of natural gas in both of these markets. In, Asia, you've had LNG prices well over $50 in MMBTU, hitting at 56 the other day. Once again, US gas prices of $6.
Right. And I guess I'll transition to you, Josh, with the major question. And I guess this is where Abaxx plays a role of what can we do? What is the solution? How do we invest in infrastructure that transitions us to an energy supply that is reliable, economic, and of course, environmentally responsible?
Absolutely. And, first drawing on some of the points that David made. Remember, this is very policy driven. There's a lot of and so when investors are looking at trying to invest in this space, you have to recognize there's a lot of uncertainty here driven by policy. I mean, you look at some of the even a year ago, we were. There were offtake agreements to bring more U.S. LNG into Europe, specifically into France. They got vetoed on environmental grounds. To finance the infrastructure we need in LNG, investors need long-term certainty, particularly since it's harder and harder to finance hydrocarbon-based projects based on a lot of the mandates coming down from the top, through BlackRock initiatives. And I think there's now over 100 trillion worth of asset managers that have committed to more disclosure of carbon policies. And essentially making, raising the cost of capital on new infrastructure projects. So going back to what David was talking about, around the marketplace being far more international. Like, we really need that infrastructure during the energy transition.
Mm-hmm.
So from Abaxx's perspective, what we really focused on, we saw this sort of this energy transition market structure problem happening sort of 3-4 years ago. We thought it was sort of inevitable that we would run into this natural gas, constraint. LNG is probably, got one of the largest supply gaps looking forward. Something like 30% if you project, demand where it should be headed versus the infrastructure in place. We need a lot more LNG. We need a lot more flexibility to move energy globally from one region to another.
Okay, so if you could just dig a little deeper there and tell us how that works, because I've been hearing so much buzz about how carbon credits is really the next big hot sector. How can investors get ahead of it, and how does it solve that problem?
Yeah, so again, when we're at Abaxx, what we're focused on is building a new commodity futures exchange, very much focused on the physical markets and the physical delivery of LNG, so that instead of having to sign up very long-term offtake agreements, producers can finance, specifically by selling forward into the market, into a trusted contract. Where they know they can get delivery. So if you think about the great energy markets in the U.S., WTI and Henry Hub specifically, these are physically delivered markets that allowed the U.S. to build up such a great infrastructure, particularly in natural gas, and that's now needed in Europe and Asia as well. So we've been building the futures market for that. But to your point on carbon, this is also very important because the hard to abate sectors like natural gas is just going to have to be part of our global economy for the next 20-30 years. The problem is we still have to burn and transport those molecules. So we need to look to offset that outside of specifically the LNG supply chain. So people are investing in nature-based solutions, forestry, afforestation projects, cook stoves, various ways to reduce carbon in other sectors of the economy to offset that natural gas that's needed.
I like how you say this, Josh. I'm just going to use this quote. You said, we need to lower carbon emissions and deal with climate change, or else we leave our way of life vulnerable to a global crisis. But we need reliable energy too, and we will never achieve the first without the second. As we have seen in the current crisis in Europe and China, the lack of reliable power leads to a quick move back to coal, a move in the opposite direction of where we need to go to deal with climate change. Are you optimistic that we're going to be headed in the right direction?
I am, and I actually think what's happening today is a very big wake-up call, and it happens to be happening at the exact same time as COP26 is starting, at the end of the month. So everybody in Europe is going to be acutely aware of the issues. Even though we think that the capital markets in the world has made large step forward in the last year or two around this energy transition, I think the energy, the budding energy crisis right now in Europe and Asia. I think I'm very hopeful. I guess as an entrepreneur, I'm always an optimist. I'm very hopeful that this brings a lot more pragmatism to the discussion. We can't reverse back to putting this on the shelf like we did for almost 10 years. But we just need to be more pragmatic about a longer term solution that includes something like LNG plus carbon offsets.
And just getting back to you, David, as we're about to enter the winter season, and obviously these are major concerns in Europe. How do you think it's going to play out? By the time we get to March, how bad will it be?
Well, I think that's why you're seeing the gas price spike now. It's kind of interesting. Why do you see these types of prices before winter? It's because the market wants to get that storage filled going into winter. Because if you're not filled going into winter, then there's a chance you run out. And who are you rationing out of the market at that point? It's people trying to heat their homes. And instead, what you're seeing now is who are the companies shutting down and using less natural gas? Tends to be more industrial users, tends to be fertilizer users. So what the market's trying to do by spiking now instead of waiting until February or March when you're into the winter is to buy itself time. In commodity markets, what you often see is, if you get a high price early, that lets supply respond. If you wait until you get a high price, the only thing that can respond at that point is demand. And so, that's what we're looking at now. Hopefully what you'll see is the high prices start to rein in demand. We're starting to see hopefully a pickup in flows out of Russia. Hopefully it gives the market a chance to rebalance itself, but that doesn't take away that, to me, what we're seeing now is a bit of a prologue of what we're likely to see over the next few years, where we have a more vulnerable system. And unless we make that investment in spare capacity, in alternative sources of supply, that's all the market can do, is create these price spikes and try to keep things in balance.
But Dave, won't we see some government intervention? Because, heating people's homes should not be a luxury.
Right. And I think that's, going forward, what we're trying to do is find ways to both deal with the vulnerabilities in the climate and deal with vulnerabilities in our energy supply. And, Josh often talks about, thinking about the world in systems. And, I think there's been the focus of, hey, the way our economic system works, the way our energy system works, that's destabilizing our climate system. Well, we need to deal with that, but we can't destabilize our energy system and our economic system in the process. So I think what government officials will need to be focused on is, how do we maintain reliable energy supply at the same time that we're dealing with the climate issue? And I think markets have a big role in that. There's a big role in getting, the exchanges in place, getting the technology in place so that the investment can flow, that builds out the new infrastructure we need, that'll be reliable, but also help us achieve that transition to a lower carbon economy.
Dave, I appreciate your thoughts today. Josh, it's always a pleasure speaking with you as well. And you're a serial entrepreneur. I know you're always working on new and exciting things. Can you give us any sneak peek of what's next?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been working on a company called Base Carbon, which has been sort of a partnership and a spin out of Abaxx. Again, Abaxx really focused on building that market infrastructure so that capital can get to the places where it's needed. But Base Carbon, as I mentioned before, we believe there's going to be a lot of offsets needed, to things like LNG, that we just can't turn off gas overnight. Clearly, as we're seeing in Asia and Europe. So we're going to need significant investment going into other decarbonizing projects so that, when someone buys a cargo of LNG, it can be offset in another sector. So we think the carbon markets, right now, those voluntary offset markets are sub $1 billion annually. We think this is headed up probably 100 billion or more by the end of the decade. So this is a type of growth we you almost never see in commodity markets. So this is going to be, I think, dynamic and really change capital markets and Canadian capital markets in specifically.
Wow. So just for investors watching, Josh, how can they get ahead of the game there? Like, how do you invest, or how do you educate yourself more on the sector that's probably really brand new to most folks watching here?
I think you said the key word, education, and education, this is a brand new commodity. There's a lot of complexities. There's a lot of misinformation in this sector. So, I think right now it's really, not moving too quickly and, chasing all the newest shiny toys, but really, do the education. And I'll also put another quick plug if I can on a podcast we've created called Smarter Markets, which is doing exactly that. We want to open source, some of the best thinkers in these spaces to have these long form discussions, very much like your platform, of market education, because again, we need more critical thinking, and we need better long-term planning, both in capital markets and in political systems.
Because Josh, as you know, once the sector becomes hot, everyone wants to be in it. We're going to see so many players. And then for an investor at home, how do you decide where you want to place your money, who to trust? So of course, that educational element is so important. I love your podcast, by the way. So thank you for coming on and giving us a primer on that. I appreciate your time and thoughts, gentlemen.
Thank you, Daniela.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all for watching. We'll have much more for you, so be sure to stay tuned to Stansberry Investor. In the meantime, don't forget to register for premier content you can't get anywhere else at danielacambone.com. Thanks for watching.